It's been a while, so it's time for a fish room tour. The fish tank barn is home to about 100 tanks and is about the size of a 1.5 car garage with 2 stories. So let's jump into the tour. The first tank that you'll come to in the fish tank barn is my 245 gallon South American cichlid tank. When I live streamed, this tank would be in the background behind me. It's aquascaped with driftwood and a sand substrate. This tank is home to a variety of different cichlid species, 2 different species of geophagus, the hecali and the altifrons, a wild pair of Rio Nene severums, a group of Therichthys maculopinus, which are related to the firemouth cichlids, 2 convex cichlids, a Mesoheros ultramaculatus, and some black skirt tetras as dithers. I do have some future plans with this tank, which include taking it down and redoing it with a background. We're going to make a left turn now and take a look at the rack, which is home to a 125 gallon African cichlid tank with 240 breeders on top. The 125 gallon African cichlid tank is home to a large group of Mbuna, including yellow labs and purple ACI. Also in this tank is an OB peacock as well as a cobalt blue peacock. Since I breed fish out of this tank, it is likely aquascaped with some coral reef rock and planted with Vallisneria, which seems to do okay despite the African cichlids. The first 40 breeder on top is home to a group of Kalmani swordtails. It is aquascaped much like the African cichlid tank below, with sand, Vallisneria, and the same coral rock. I've been getting quite a few fry from this tank, and I'm looking forward to sharing these fish with all of my fish keeping friends. The next tank is home to my Xiphophorus clemensiae. This beautiful fish comes from a very specific location. I'm happy to report that I am starting to see some fry from this tank and looking forward to growing these fish out. Also in this tank is a group of super red bushy-nosed plecos that I got from Jimmy before he moved back to Washington. Finally, there's a lone hatchet fish in here that I got from Jimmy as well. I do make sure to feed this fish some floating food so it gets enough to eat. Heading further to the left, we have a rack of 3 37-gallon cubes and a group of 10-gallon grow-out tanks. Heading from right to left on the bottom, the first 37-gallon cube is home to my Gerardinus metallicus. These are the yellow form, so you won't find a whole lot of black on the bottom of the males. This is something I will work to remedy in the future as I try to line breed more black into this group of fish. Also, you'll find some blue dream shrimp in this tank, which is something we don't talk a lot about here in the fish tank barn. A little over a year ago, I did get some Neocaridina shrimp that came along with some plants I ordered and figured out they were pretty easy to take care of. So now you will find quite a few Neocaridina shrimp around in the fish tank barn. This tank is planted with more Vallisneria, guppy grass, and has a gravel substrate, which you can find at the hardware store. So moving onwards now, we come to my angelfish tank. There used to be a pair of fish in here, but unfortunately I did lose the female. So we will either be faced with the decision to put this tank in the community tank upstairs or find another female for this fish. But this male angelfish is still doing well. The next cube is made up of a group of mutt guppies and bumblebee platies. Most of these fish went out into the summer tubs, but there were a few stragglers. I am looking forward to seeing the color patterns that come back from the tubs, as well as seeing what happens in the future with these fish. As we move to the top of this rack, unfortunately there really isn't much to show here, but I will show you the red spot endlers that I did an unboxing of a few months back. They are really starting to color up. Let's move on to the next rack now. This rack is home to 2 75-gallon tanks and another set of 5-gallon grow-out tanks. The first 75-gallon tank is home to a group of Discus and a group of cardinal tetras. And as we move on to the next 75-gallon tank, this tank is home to my Pseudotropheus interruptus chismulu. This breeding group includes 2 males, which are blue in color, and 4 yellow females. As you will see later in the video, we are starting to get a nice group of fry. The things of note in this top grow-out rack are the large group of yellow lab fry, as well as the large group of Pseudotropheus interruptus chismulu. As we go to the opposite side of the Discus tank and the chismulu tank, first you'll come across a 90-gallon tank whose purpose will be determined at a later date. As we look above that tank real quick, there are 340 breeders, which will probably end up being either shell dweller tanks or housing some Goodieds or some other live bears. So as we move along this section of the fish room, there is a 120-gallon tank, which is home to a group of goiter rivers that I also did pick up from Jimmy. Also in this tank, you will find the first of many Goodeid species that we'll talk about in this tour, the Capelyctes incaustus, which is a beautifully striped Goodeid. These Goodeids have bred quite well in this tank. Then also in this tank, to add a little bit of color, we do have a nice group of gold dust mollies. From an aquascaping perspective, there's a nice piece of wood that looks like a root in the center, which is planted with crypts, with Pogostemon Stellatus octopus on one side and jungle val on the other. As we slide along here to the 90-gallon tank, we do find the jeweled goodeid, which is the Xenotoca variata. This fish has spawned quite regularly for me as well, and is growing up quite nicely. One of my favorite fish in the fish room. Also in this tank is a group of black Berlin swordtails, who have not seen any fry from yet, but are definitely some stunning fish. As is a common theme throughout this fish room, you'll find a lot of Pogostemon Stellatus octopus, jungle val, and hardware store gravel. As we head down to the bottom here, we do have a 54-gallon bow front, which is home to the Amica splendens. So I have had these fish now for about 2 years, and they have done quite well for me. I did have a disease outbreak earlier this year, which I did manage to overcome, and looking forward to getting these guys back on track and to start getting some more fry from them. And this is definitely another tank that I do want to work on some aquascaping with, maybe making another trip back to the river to get some stones. So let's go ahead now and head to the other side of the fish room here. This 125-gallon is home to a nice group of Cyprochromis leptosoma, yellowhead and conde. As you can see here, some of the males are starting to get a little bit of color in the fins, which has actually got me pretty excited. And this tank is also complemented with some shell dwellers of the Leptosoma ornatopinus kigoma. I am really looking forward to seeing this tank develop. As we head to the back wall of the barn here, we see two 20-gallon longs that I got from Jimmy. The top tank is home to a large variety of cherry shrimp, as well as some mud endlers. This tank is very heavily planted, and we were able to save the aquascape that Jimmy had in the original tank. The lower tank is another favorite, which is home to some Variatus plates and another cool goodeid species, the Actinobius toweri, or blue-tailed goodeid. What I really like about this fish is the blue tail from the males. It really sticks out and shines in the right conditions. It also does make me pretty happy to see that we do have some fry in this tank as well. So as we head towards the stairs, you will come across one last tank, the 55-gallon Tropheus tank. This tank is home to the Tropheus red bemba. I did pick up 6 of these at the big fish deal, and they have colored up quite nicely. I am thinking about moving these fish to a tank with a lighter colored substrate in order to bring out their colors a little bit more. So let's go ahead and jump upstairs now. The downstairs part of the fish tank barn is home to a lot more larger aquascape tanks, but up here there's a lot more breeding that happens. As we look out over from the top of the stairs, to our right we see a group of 75-gallon tanks, as well as a group of 3 29-gallon tanks. The first 75-gallon tank directly in front of us is one of my favorites. It's home to 3 different species of fish. The first fish that we'll look at is the king of the swordtails, the Xiphophorus montezume. This majestic fish has a huge sword and is absolutely one of my favorite fish here in the fish tank barn. The next fish is a new addition, the Melanotania bosemani from Aves Creek, which I recently picked up with a few other rainbow species from Dan's Fish. Also in this tank are some high-fin gold mollies, which add a nice splash of color. So this tank was recently aquascaped, so it's kind of a rainbow fish goodeid blackwater tank with all the tannins in the water. The rainbow fish in this tank are the Melanotania Kali timbuni, which there's 6 of, and also in here are the Alataca dugesi, which is a very cool goodeid in its own right. I have some pretty high hopes for this tank once we can clear the tannins through the water and get some more plants in this tank. The last 75-gallon in this row is probably the most entertaining tank in the fish tank barn. This is the Lake Tanganyikan shell dweller tank. This tank is home to a group of Neolamprologus similis, as well as some Daffodil burchardi. Since we set this tank up in July, they've been doing quite a bit of digging and quite a bit of earth moving in this tank. I've also seen some fry from this colony, which has made me quite happy. As we're standing at the top of the stairs, there are 2 29-gallon tanks that are behind us. The bottom 29-gallon tank is for a player to be named later, probably once summer tubbing season comes to an end, and we'll figure out which fish to put in there. The top tank is home to a group of Santa Maria endlers and more cherry shrimp. I've also added a group of 6 Praecox rainbow fish in here that I got in the same order with the 2 previously mentioned rainbow fish species. The cherry shrimp seem to enjoy the guppy grass that is floating on the top of this tank. We're now going to go ahead and look at the row of 29-gallon tanks that are below the 75s. In the first 29-gallon tank, we have a group of Limia nigrofasciata. I've had these guys for a couple of months now, and they've definitely put on some size. These fish have a nice striping pattern and a really cool sheen, which really makes them some wonderful fish. I've also been lucky to get some fry in the few months that I've had them. Next up is one of my favorite wild live bears, the Limia melanogaster. This is one of my favorite live bears where the females are just as stunning as the males. I do love the black spot on the females with their iridescent sheens, while the males have some pretty cool yellow and black markings. Who says wild live bears aren't beautiful? The next fish I have found to be pretty reclusive, the Neswalkhyotl swordtail, or otherwise known as the Nessie sword. I've had these fish for a few months, and while being pretty elusive, I have managed to sneak in a pic of this male. This swordtail lives at higher elevations and prefers cooler water. Across the way now is a 20-gallon rack which is home to 15 20-gallon high tanks. These are all breeding tanks that are set up with mostly either hornwort or guppy grass. So let's go ahead and walk through the fish. Starting at the top, the first tank you're going to come to is the golden teddy or Xenophallus umbratilis. While this tank has some rather dark lighting, this is a pretty cool yellow live bearer that should be more prevalent in the hobby. Moving on to the next tank is the Apistogramma mcmasteri. This was another fish that I got from Jimmy on my trip to Ohio. I do love the colors of both the males and the females of this species. To help with the spawning of these fish, I have stocked this tank with some Apisto caves and some Indian almond leaves that I purchased at the aquarium co-op. The next fish I want to show you is the Limia perugiae. While this Limia might look quite plain, it has a wonderful iridescence that would bring joy to any fish keeper. This is another pair that I am happy to have quite a few fry growing out from. Next we have a pair of shell dwellers. These are the Lamprologus congwensis. Well, right now we do only have two. I will be looking to get some more of these fish in the future and definitely adding to the colony. Chances are I'll probably be moving them to a larger tank. We're now going to move on to one of the smallest fish here in the fish tank barn, the Neohedrandria elegans, or tiger teddy. While this is a tiny fish, it is absolutely beautiful. As we move onwards here, we do see a nice group of black bar endlers. I did start out with a group of 5 of these guys, and now we've got a pretty nice colony going of these as well. As we're looking onward in this rack, we're looking at the Xenotania resolanae, or leopard goodeid. These fish were originally picked up at an auction as fry from Sargent Tank, and now have fry of their own. It is truly a rewarding experience as a fish breeder to complete the circle of life for the species. Next up is probably one of the most beautiful goodeids that you can buy, the Cracodon lateralis, or rainbow goodeid. The males get a really cool red color and are absolutely stunning. While this is one of the first goodeids that I got in my fish room, this has been a species that has proven difficult to breed, probably because they are eating their fry. Also in this tank is a pretty cool looking group of red and blue Variatus platies. As we head further towards the back of the fish room, you'll see 3 29-gallon tanks and a 15-gallon. The first 29-gallon tank that we're going to come to is home to the Horatio Dominguez guppies, which I got from Rusty Wessel at the OCA auction last November. These wild-type guppies are absolutely beautiful with their blue tails. These wild-type guppies have been pretty prolific, producing a multitude of fry. I have a colony both in here and a colony in the summer tubs outside. The next group of fish in the 29-gallon below is a group of Vienna double-sword guppies that I picked up in Akron at an auction in March of 2020. These fish have had a slow start to breeding, but I am starting now to see some fry. The guppy grass that's in this tank has definitely provided some hiding places for fry. Heading back up to the top is the Xiphophorus bergsmani. It's another fish I did pick up off of Aquabid. This wild-type platy is pretty cool, and I am looking forward to seeing these fish grow up. As we head to the bottom tank, which is a 15-gallon, this tank is home to the Snowcross endlers. This is really a great fish and has really produced quite a few fry for me, and another fish that I have both inside and outside in the summer tubs. Before we leave the middle of the fish room, we come to this 29-gallon. This 29-gallon is home to the Indian rice fish. I did pick up 10 of these guys a few months ago from Dan's Fish as well. With the heavy planting of Pogostemon stellatus octopus, I have seen quite a few fry in this tank, which has made me quite happy. As we head back to the back of the barn, we now find some more 29-gallon tanks as well as a 55-gallon to our right. This 55-gallon is home to a group of shell dwellers, the Neolamprologus brevis sunspot. This group currently consists of 3 adults and quite a few fry. I am definitely looking forward to this colony growing up and seeing a nice bustling tank of shellies. We also come to the Limia islay, which used to be known as the Limia species tiger until it was recently described. This fish is native to Lake Miragon in Haiti, and I am happy to report that I did find a few fry from these fish just the other day. Below the Limia is the Scyphia multipunctata. This is a truly wonderful species of goodeid that should be more prevalent in the hobby. The males have striking markings on their side, which is different with each individual fish, much like a fingerprint. I have gotten some fry occasionally from these fish, but this is definitely a fish I do want to get some more fry from and get more established. Let's turn to the left now and take a look at these 20-gallon high tanks. The first 20-gallon tank we come to is home to a group of betta edithae. This is a mouth-brooding, wild-type betta that I am looking to get some fry from soon. This is definitely a fish that's on my list to spawn and do some more study with in the near future. Next to the bettas is a group of panther danios, or the Danio ascalpi. These little fish dart in and out of the Pogostemon stellatus octopus and are quite fun to watch. I've even had an accidental spawn of this fish, which is always quite exciting. As we head our way back towards the stairs, we come to a 54-gallon bow front, which is home to a trio of Laticaria curviceps, as well as a few coral platies. This tank has a pretty nice piece of driftwood, but will be subject to a future aquascaping project. To my surprise, the curviceps have had no interest in consuming any of the platy fry. Next to the 54-gallon bow front, we find the 37-gallon cube, which is home to another Goodied, the Xenotoca lion's eye. I did pick these fish up at Aquashella Dallas in 2019, and they've bred like gangbusters. I've even been able to distribute them to my fish keeping friends. We finally made it to the saltwater breeding rack. This breeding rack consists of 20-gallon high tanks, which is one of my favorite breeding tanks in all the fish tank barn, and definitely one of my favorite saltwater breeding tanks. Clownfish were one of my first passions in the fish keeping hobby. These tanks are generally set up with a pot, much like you would for a cichlid for spawning, and filtered with a central sump. If you're interested in spawning and raising clownfish, check out the playlist I have in the card above. So now let's walk through the fish. The first fish I come to are my snowflake ocellaris pair. I've had spawns out of this pair in the past, and once I get ready to start breeding clownfish again, these will probably be the first to start. Next up are the black snowflake pair, which at first had a rough start, but are now doing quite well. Next up are my Amphiprion alardi, or Allard's anemone fish. This African clownfish species is not one that's very commonly found in the hobby. I got lucky and found these at a local fish store when they were very small, and they've definitely put on some size since then. Also in this tank, you'll find a couple of Molly Miller blennies, which I won at the last Marine Breeding Initiative conference in 2019. Next up is the lightning maroon clownfish. These stunning clownfish have a very cool story on how they came to the aquarium trade. If you want to know more about this, I'll go ahead and put a link in the description so you can read up on that story. We now get to the tomato clownfish. While this was a spawning pair in the past, I unfortunately did lose the female. So at some point I will definitely have to get a new fish and get these fish going again. Moving on from the saltwater world, we come to another fish with a story, the Vienna guppy. Corey from the Aquarium Co-op went to Europe a couple of years ago and was able to bring these fish back to the United States. I got this fish from Jimmy when he moved, and truly honored to have this beautiful guppy in my care and in my fish room. Moving on to the next tank, we do see some Galaxy Medaka rice fish, which are stunning in their own right. I have seen eggs from these fish, but have yet to find some fry. It is part of my future breeding aspirations to raise some fish like rice fish and other egg-laying species more often here in the fish tank barn. As we make our way down the stairs and exit from the fish tank barn, I really do hope you enjoyed this tour. In future fish room tours, we'll cover more of the brass tacks and how the fish barn actually runs and how things are set up. Until the next video, stay safe, stay fishy, and we'll see you on the next video.